Welcome back, Focus learners. If you're looking to completely demystify Cambridge AS and A-level accounting, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're opening up the examiner's playbook for a serious strategic masterclass on Syllabus 9706. Before we even start, make sure you hit subscribe for Ace the Exam's IGCSE O and A levels. That's at AceTheExam_IGCSE, and turn on all notifications so you never miss a weekly Cambridge breakthrough strategy. Okay, let's get into it. We aren't just going to sit here and look at basic textbook definitions today. No way. We're going to look at exactly how Cambridge examiners actually think, where students bleed marks, and the precise, high-level strategies you need to secure those top-tier A-star results. Let's get right to work. Listen to this. This isn't just my personal opinion. This is pulled directly from actual principal examiner reports. They consistently highlight that this specific cluster of accounting concepts, consistency, prudence, realization, duality, materiality, and objectivity, is an absolute, massive stumbling block for candidates across the board. It's literally one of the most misunderstood areas in accounting. Students always think they know them, right? You've got the highly technical students who excel at formulas but completely freeze up on open-ended evaluation. Then you've got the creative thinkers who can argue a point all day but lack structural precision. When they try to apply these concepts under real exam pressure, the whole thing just falls apart. Well, we are fixing that right now. We're going to decode exactly what the examiners are desperately searching for in your answers. Here is our strategic roadmap for today's masterclass. First, unlocking core concepts. Second, the procedural framework strategy. Third, evaluating quality of evidence. Fourth, top 3 examiner warnings. And finally, number 5, final masterclass takeaways. Let's move on. Section 1, unlocking core concepts. Okay, consistency, prudence, realization, duality, materiality, and objectivity. You know the names. These are the absolute fundamental principles of Syllabus 9706. But here's the secret that separates your average, middle-of-the-pack candidates from the elite, top-performing students. The best students do not just memorize these definitions as isolated robotic bullet points. They deeply understand how they interlock, how they fight with each other, and how they connect. For example, they know that prudence might actually conflict directly with objectivity in certain valuation scenarios. They understand that duality is the mechanical engine driving the double entry, but materiality, that dictates what actually gets reported in the final accounts. You've got to stop viewing these as a simple list to memorize. Instead, treat them as a highly critical lens through which literally every single financial decision is made. Now look at how the assessment framework is actually built. It prioritizes analytical depth over superficial breadth, and it's testing you across 3 very distinct cognitive domains. Look at column 1, knowledge and understanding. This is your fundamental mastery. It's just knowing the definitions. Column 2 is analysis. Now we're talking about logical, structured reasoning. This means actively connecting those concepts to a specific business scenario. And then we hit column 3, the holy grail, evaluation. This is all about questioning assumptions, challenging the data, and justifying your final conclusions. You have to understand the anatomy of command words here. If the question says explain, that's very different from to what extent. Analyze is just breaking it down, but evaluate is weighing it up. The vast majority of candidates just get permanently stuck in column 1. To get the top marks, you have to forcefully push your answers into columns 2 and 3. Which brings us to a really pivotal question, doesn't it? Why do students find evaluating evidence and drawing conclusions so incredibly hard? Seriously, why is this the part where everyone drops marks? It's simply because evaluating requires you to step away from the absolute safety of simple calculations and rigid black and white facts. It forces you to operate entirely in the gray area. You have to look at a messy business scenario and say, well, under the concept of realization, we should theoretically do X, but if we rigorously apply prudence, we might actually need to consider Y. It requires you to weigh conflicting evidence against each other. And honestly, that is a higher-order critical thinking skill that takes serious strategy and practice to master. Section 2, the procedural framework strategy. All right, let's talk about the method marks strategy. In Cambridge accounting, marks are heavily awarded for the process itself, not just the final numerical answer. Let that sink in. If you just magically write down a final figure at the bottom of the page and it happens to be wrong, you get a 0. But if you show a highly systematic process, actively applying the correct concepts in a logical way, you can scoop up incredibly valuable method marks even if your final calculation is totally off because you hit a wrong button on your calculator. Systematic processing is quite literally just as vital as your final numeric outcome. Do not skip steps. To practically guarantee those method marks, examiners are essentially looking for a standardized 6-step sequence. Step 1,
deconstruct the question. What is the exact command word? Are they asking you to merely explain, or are they pushing you to evaluate? Step 2, extract the relevant data from the stimulus material. Step 3, select your analytical framework. Out of the 6 core concepts, which one actually applies here? Step 4, execute your analysis with crystal clear working and notation. Step 5, verify your results. Do they actually make logical sense in the real world? And finally, Step 6, present your final answer. Listen, if you memorize this exact sequence and apply it rigorously to complex, high-tariff past paper problems, those big 9 to 15 mark questions, you're basically creating an unbreakable safety net for your marks.
But hey, I need to give you a very quick warning on that final step. Practical application absolutely requires professional skills. You must adhere to strict presentation conventions. We're talking proper headings, correct terminology, appropriate formats, and clear, undeniable annotation. You simply cannot ignore formatting. Examiners frequently write in their reports that candidates lose the easiest marks possible simply because they present an income statement or a statement of financial position using completely sloppy, unofficial, chaotic layouts. Treat your exam paper like a professional, finalized document that you are submitting directly to a strict board of directors. Section 3. Evaluating quality of evidence. Now we get to the core of it. There is a massive, glaring difference between an average candidate and an elite candidate. Average candidates always rely on a standard, descriptive framework. They literally just repeat what the data says. They'll write something basic like, "The business made a profit." Wow, thanks. But top-scoring candidates, they use a purely evaluative framework. They aggressively question the assumptions behind that profit figure. They compare different accounting approaches. For instance, they'll analyze exactly how a sudden change in inventory valuation completely manipulates that profit. And finally, they offer a highly justified recommendation. They completely break out of descriptive writing and demonstrate true, undeniable evaluative thinking. If you want to unlock those top-tier marking bands, and I know you do, you absolutely must include these specific actionable elements in your written responses. Whenever you're evaluating evidence quality, you need to actively identify the limitations of the financial data provided. Like, what are the numbers conspicuously not telling us? You must point out the assumptions management has made. Are they being way too optimistic and thereby completely violating the concept of prudence? You should always offer alternative interpretations of the exact same data. And finally, explicitly state exactly how these factors directly affect your final conclusion. This right here, this is the exact fail-proof blueprint for critical analysis. Section 4. Top 3 examiner warnings. All right, pay close attention because these are the traps. Examiner warning number 1, using the wrong approach for the given context. This happens all the time when a student just blindly applies a memorized formula without stopping to check if the specific, nuanced business scenario actually requires a completely different conceptual application. Warning number 2, we literally just mentioned this, but forgetting to check format and presentation. Careless layouts will bleed your marks dry. And warning number 3, which is perhaps the most fatal of them all, answers that are not specific to the stimulus material context. Look, if the question is specifically about a manufacturing business struggling with inventory realization, and you just write out a generic copy-pasted essay about the textbook definition of realization without once mentioning their specific products or the figures in the prompt, you are going to hit a brutal ceiling on your marks. Context is king, always. In fact, let's look at this stark examiner alert. Quote, candidates consistently confuse key terminology. Always define terms before using them in extended responses. End quote. Let me emphasize this as heavily as I possibly can. Failing to define your terms is the absolute fastest way to completely lose the examiner's confidence. If you are going to argue that a business has breached the concept of consistency, you need to spend the very first sentence of that paragraph briefly defining what consistency actually means in a strict accounting context. You have to establish your baseline knowledge before you even try to build your complex evaluation. Section 5, final masterclass takeaways. So to completely crush this syllabus, you need to rely on these 4 core pillars. First, master the dynamic interplay between the 6 core concepts: consistency, prudence, realization, duality, materiality, and objectivity. Second, rigorously apply the 6-step procedural framework every single time so you strategically capture every single method mark available. Third, actively evaluate limitations, assumptions, and alternative interpretations to force your essay responses up into the highest marking bands.
And fourth, practice these exact methods on past paper questions strictly under timed conditions. Because look, strategy without actual practice is just theory. Before we hit the final thought, just a quick reminder. Crushing Cambridge exams requires consistent strategy. So make sure you hit that subscribe button for Ace the Exam's IGCSE, O, and A levels at acetheexam_IGCSE. Turn on the notification bell for future exam hacks, and drop a comment down below with your exact target grade. Put it out there. I want to leave you with this final, genuinely provocative thought. As you prepare for your exam, I want you to ask yourself this. Can you successfully transfer your conceptual understanding of these 6 principles to an entirely unfamiliar business context? Think about it. If the exam throws a completely weird, totally niche industry at you out of nowhere, are you going to panic? Or will you calmly and methodically apply the lens of prudence, materiality, and duality to just solve the problem? True mastery means the context can radically change, but your analytical framework remains completely unbreakable. Keep practicing, stay incredibly focused, and use these exact strategies to absolutely ace your next exam.